This is 3FM.
I'm going to stop the island going bankrupt. The national translates to the local. If our economy is wrecked, if the island begins to depopulate, then properties will be worth nothing on the island. People's life savings that they put into bricks and mortar will effectively disappear. We cannot allow that to happen. I think we're about 4 years away from it. In this year, the government will transfer £117 million from our reserves. At that rate of overspending, we've got about 4 years left before we hit the buffers. It's very hard to say, but I imagine we would have to go to the UK for a bailout, and I think their terms would probably be they would insist that we would become part of the United Kingdom, we would be paying UK rates of corporate tax and personal tax, and that would destroy our economy. We would lose the finance sector, which generates 34% of our GDP and 25% of all jobs. We would lose the e-gaming sector, which generates 17% of our GDP, and we would lose corporate service providers. We would have record rates of unemployment, and the island would start to depopulate very rapidly. We have been overspending. We have in particular failed to control the public sector pension scheme, which is now completely out of control. The total liability on that scheme is more than £3 billion. According to the government's own figures, by 21 to 22, the taxpayer will be contributing more than £100 million to keep it going. That scheme needs very urgent reform. The first thing I'd like to do is address the public sector pension scheme. I'd like to freeze benefits under the scheme. That means that people get the benefits they've already accrued. It gives them certainty, which is extremely important. They've paid into the scheme in some cases for many years, but all future contributions would have to go into a money purchase scheme with no unfunded element. At the moment, many civil servants, many I've spoken to on the doorstep, are supportive of the change because they believe the government will default on their pension. I mean, there are certain issues that are very hard to deal with. One of them is parking. It's a huge problem, but it's a huge problem all over Douglas, everywhere in the constituency, and I imagine everywhere in other people's constituencies as well. There are simply too many cars on the island, and there's no magic bullet. The decisions that we will need to take in the next 5 years should have been taken by the last administration. We should never be in this position where we're potentially one house of keys away from disaster. We need the funds, first and foremost, to have a first-class health system. And again, it comes back to the economy. I think we have too many managers and not enough clinical staff. Now we've been struggling to attract top-class clinicians, and the reason we've been struggling is the uncertainty over the pension scheme. Once we have certainty, once we know what we can offer, once there's no possibility of default by the government, I believe things will start to improve. I think it is useful that we can control who comes into the island. We know who's here, we know what they're doing. That's not being paranoid, and it doesn't have to be a passport. It simply needs to be some form of photo ID. It would bring sea travel in line with air travel. We need to promote ourselves to the world. Controlling cost is only half the equation. We need to bring new income into the island. We need new inward investment. We are now a very well-regulated offshore jurisdiction. We're slightly ahead of the regulatory curve, and I think we no longer need be cowed by the hue and cry against so-called tax havens. We can go out to the world. We can say that we are unashamedly a low-tax jurisdiction. We are well-regulated, and we are cooperative. We should build on our existing strengths. I would like to certainly have a diversified economy. Our economy is more diversified than Jersey's, at least. The government has succeeded there. Jersey, 41% of their GDP is finance. For us, it's 34%. I think there is more growth to be had in finance and in e-gaming and in corporate service providers, but we need to diversify. We offer an excellent fiscal climate for entrepreneurs in all sectors. We had a very successful biomed conference last year. I think the biomedical sector could be big for us, and possibly light manufacturing, though I do emphasise the light. Tourism could well be a growth area if one considers the growth of terrorism across Europe. This may discourage people from travelling internationally. If they want to take holidays within the British Isles, we're ideally placed to exploit that. We are an island, we are very safe, and we can give the feeling of going abroad without going abroad.
More music for the Isle of Man.
3FM.